Very good morning to all of you. In series of our interactions that we have had in the last 2 weeks, or we'll say last 2 Saturdays, in this week, we are being joined by some very illustrious peers, in a sense that they all graduated from this institution. While their years of graduation may seem that they have passed some time ago, or maybe few years ago, but I can assure you that the wisdom that they will be sharing is timeless. We're lucky to have them this morning, and we have been always honored by their presence, their sense of wisdom shared with us. And continuing that tradition, today, this morning, we are being joined by a very illustrious alum of this institution, Mr. R.C. Narayan. I welcome you, sir, for this morning. We will also be joined by our ARC committee chair, Professor Poonam Garg, chair MDP, Professor Sapna, and deans as well. I formally open this and request Abhinav to take it over from me and to introduce the guest of this morning. I will resist from using the word guest for this morning because sometimes this place, this campus was something which they cherished and they made it the part of their life. Nonetheless, continuing the tradition, I hand it over to Abhinav. Abhinav, you please take it over from me.
Thanks a lot, Vinayak sir. Well, I'm sure the class of 23 is enjoying a series of introducing these distinguished alumni to them, as they have been taking immense learning from them for the past few Saturdays. Today, we have with us our esteemed alumni speaker, Mr. R.C. Narayan. I welcome him, the faculty members, and the students. Good morning to all. Mr. R.C. Narayan is a 1987 PhD BM graduate of IMT Ghaziabad and a recipient of its Distinguished Alumni Award, conferred to him by Sri Ratan Tata in the year 2003. He also holds an EMBA degree from the Kellogg School of Management, Northwestern University, Chicago, and from the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. Mr. Narang is a co-founder of Stasi Corporation, incorporated in the United States, and a founder of Navitas Technology Limited, incorporated in Hong Kong. He led Stasi Corporation from its inception in 1996 to a 100-employee, 36 million company over a period of 10 years and then completed its sale to a private equity firm in the year 2007. Stasi is now a well-established $100+ million enterprise poised for listing at the New York Stock Exchange. Mr. Narang founded his second startup in 2007 by the name of Navitas Technology Limited and is working towards making it another successful enterprise. Navitas is a Tier 2 manufacturer of plastic injection molds and dies to the automotive industry in the United States, Europe, and India. Today, Mr. Narang has joined us all the way from Hong Kong to share his journey with all of us aspiring to be entrepreneurs and business leaders. Now, let us all welcome Sir for his talk titled An Entrepreneur's Journey. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Abhinav. Thank you, Mr. Tripathi, for this opportunity to interact with students. I miss my students' days, so this is a good opportunity. Let me see if I can share my screen. Yeah, are you able to share my screen? Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, sir.
All right. Congratulations, class of 2023. I hope you all are well and safe during these extraordinary times. It must be a very good feeling to be a part of IMT family. My best wishes to all of you. Make the best of these 2 years, as this could change your life as it changed mine. I graduated from IMT about 34 years ago, and in these 34 years, I've been to IMT just twice. First, I was there to collect my Distinguished Alumni Award, and the second time for the 25 years reunion. And I miss those days. I miss IMT days. So make the best of it. So during my presentation, if any of you have any questions, feel free to put it in the chat group, and I will try to address them either during my presentation or after the presentation. Usually, I don't like to talk about myself. I prefer to listen what others have to say about themselves. Well, today I will be talking about myself, and this is because I'd like you to know that if a person like me can make it a success, so can you. In fact, all of you. All it needs is a bit of determination and the ability to take the right decisions. Just to let you know my location, I'm in Hong Kong right now. This building on the left side, it's right next to ICC. ICC is the tallest building in Hong Kong. And I'm in this building right next to ICC on the 52nd floor of this building. I was born in Dehradun, one of my favorite cities. Grew up in Saharanpur, not very far from IMT Ghaziabad. I used to be above average in studies. I could not get admission in a medical school or an engineering college, so I ended up doing Bachelor of Science from Meerut University. That was a low point of my career, of my academic career. I was desperate to get out of my small town and stay away from my family business. Most of my fellow classmates preferred to stay in their comfort zones in my hometown. I did not. I was willing to get out of my comfort zone. 1985, I worked hard and I cleared written tests for IIMS, FMS, and Bajaj. I could not clear interviews and group discussions due to my lack of exposure to the world outside my small city. Another reason, I used to be a soft-spoken person. So group discussions, you need to be heard. Yes, you need to be heard. I was never able to make myself heard. So I couldn't clear any of the group discussions. IMT was my last hope. I managed to clear the interview group discussion and thus began my new life journey. IMT, the year 1985 to 87. It took time for me to get accepted by fellow students. I got bullied a bit, being a small towner. I quite enjoyed my 2 years at IMT. I had a lot to learn from the classroom studies and interaction with fellow classmates and professors. My takeaway from IMT, I built confidence in myself. I got my thought process organized, got some clarity about my future, and made some excellent lifelong friends. I got my first exposure to the corporate world with a summer internship at Voltas and my first job through a campus placement at Onida. One of our alumni by the name of Mr. Carwal made a name for himself at Onida. As a result, Onida came to the campus and hired a few grads. I was one of them. 1987 was my entry into the corporate world. I joined Onida. Onida used to be a market leader at that time. I joined them as a management trainee. I left it within 6 months. As they transferred me to Kanpur, I didn't want to go back to a small city. So my next job was Videocon. Videocon was a new company at that time in 1987. They were trying to compete with Onida and make a place for themselves in the market. Videocon was a tough work environment. I went through the grind, I made the most of it and had much to learn. After a few years with Videocon, I realized I won't grow much with the background and qualifications I had in place, so I took time out to do a few short-term courses at IIFT, Indian Institute of Foreign Trade, to study international business. During my time with Videocon, I also won an incentive trip to Singapore. I got fascinated by the place and started applying for overseas jobs. First major opportunity came to me in the year 1991. I got an offer from Jumbo Electronics, a Dubai-based company, for a position at their Hong Kong office. I faced resistance from my family to leave India. Once again, I was willing to step out of my comfort zone. I arrived in Hong Kong in June 1991 with empty pockets. I quite liked the working environment and the professionalism I saw in Hong Kong. I made my first trip to China, and I thought India was ahead of China at that time in terms of infrastructure. Like China used to have dusty roads, bicycles everywhere. There was no decent hotel to stay. And at that time I used to call my family and tell them, I said, India is far ahead of China. And then things started changing. During my 5 years with Jumbo Electronics, I got an excellent exposure to the home appliances industry and I also got an opportunity I made a lot of business to Europe. I recognized China's potential in manufacturing strengths. 1996 came the second major opportunity in my life. End of 1996, So a cousin of mine living in the US asked me to source some circuit boards and transformers from China. Initially, I was hesitant. Then I said, okay, I would try. So I got some trade journals, I got some samples made for circuit boards and transformers, and I helped him out. During the process of helping him out, I realized it's not so difficult to do business between US and China. There was a huge cost differential, and I thought I could take advantage of this cost differential. So did my first business deal, made $5,000 in my first deal, and it was more than my monthly salary at Jumbo Electronics. Tested the waters and realized it wasn't so difficult. January 1, 1997, I gave up my job. I took a calculated risk, but I knew I have only a 20% chance of success, and I took it. I started my first venture by the name of Stacy in partnership with a cousin of mine in the US, and I had savings just enough to survive for 6 months at that time. My dining table became my office, and my first investment was in a typewriter and a fax machine. Yes, we used to use typewriters and fax machines at that time. The first 6 months, I worked out of my home office. I worked hard to keep my costs low and cash flow positive. In 6 months, I could afford to rent a small office and hire my first employee. 1997 to 98, I faced startup issues as any new business would face. First, there were cash flow issues. I had no cash in the bank. Suppliers will not give any credit. The customers, they would ask for credit. Banks would not give me a loan without collateral. I started offering price discounts to customers and get paid early so we could pay suppliers in time and work with available working capital. I started building credibility with suppliers so we could eventually get credit terms. That was important. That was a turning point, to build credibility. I had employee issues. It wasn't easy for me to hire talented people to work for a startup, and I was not able to assure them a bright future because I myself was struggling at that time. I worked hard day and night, gave it all I had to make sure things get done in a professional manner. Growth started from year 99. I managed to buy a part of China factory. Used to be our main suppliers for circuit boards to become a manufacturer and a part factory owner. 99 to 2002, we saw business growth. We gradually moved from circuit boards to contract assembly to add more value to the products and services we offered to the customers. 2002, we reached $25 million in sales. We had 70 employees. I invested in myself at that time. I joined Kellogg School EMBA program. Now it's rated as one of the world's best for EMBA by the Financial Times. 2006, 2007, we had been running the business for about 10 years. Our sales were at $36 million and we had around 100 employees. We started getting offers from potential buyers to buy the business. The best offer came from a mid-sized private equity firm based in Cleveland, Ohio. They had the following requirements. They say the business should run without participation from owners because it said, it's the two owners who are running the business. Once they get the money, who's going to run the business? So they said, make sure the business can run without owners and they will buy it. Their second condition was they would buy 70% of the business, pay 50% in cash and 20% in the form of promissory note. And the two owners, me and my cousin, we would retain 30% until the owners exit. Private equity firms, they buy and sell businesses. They would buy a business, add value over a certain years and then sell it. So they said when they exit, then we exit with them. We agreed. I had to sign a 3 years non-compete. Non-compete means I could not do a similar business as the business I'm selling. So all my MBA learning from IMT days and Kellogg School days came in handy to make the business marketable. We nominated 5 managers to run the business independently without owners, and we became hands-off. Like I stopped going to office. I would do things remotely. We were able to close the sale in January 2007. And this was one big achievement. Selling a business is huge. It's not easy to sell a business. I got an option to stay back as an employee, as a CEO of the company, but I couldn't come to an agreement with the new owners, so I exited. The new owners gave 1% equity to each of the 5 managers, and the existing owners exited. So for these 5 managers, 1% of ownership in the company was huge. So everybody was motivated to work hard and make the company grow, take it to the next level. 2007, I started my second startup. So my partner, He exited. He said it's enough for him, the money, he can retire. He doesn't need to work hard anymore. But for me, I thought I was still able to, start another business. 2007, I started my new business by the name of Navitas. So initially, I was the sole owner of the company, and then I gave 5% equity to a key employee in my company. I looked at different options for the product in the market. I considered several options and eventually picked tooling as a product. Tooling refers to plastic injection molds and die casting dies. Like in an automobile, in a car, there are many plastic parts and metal parts, aluminum parts. To make these parts, you need a mold. We are the mold maker. We make molds for car parts. Reasons I picked up this product is, first, it didn't conflict with the non-compete signed by me. The new owners, they were okay. They thought tooling is something insignificant and it wouldn't compete with the business that I sold. Second, there was enough valuation in terms of labor content and engineering skills. Margins were decent. I didn't have to worry about becoming uncompetitive for the next several years. For my customers in Europe, US, and in the automotive industry in general, lead times are important. So only in China can we expect factories to work round the clock with full efficiency and achieve short lead times. If you're familiar with the way China works, in China, most of the factories, they work round the clock, 24 hours, 7 days. Public holidays, like in India, we have public holidays spread over the year. In China, we just have block holidays. Chinese New Year, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, October, 1 week. Another reason for picking up tooling as my new business, I thought it's all right to be small, to make good molds. I didn't have to be a big company to make good molds. We didn't have to worry about getting beaten by large competitors. All it required was a good team, efficient systems, and process controls. Another reason, risks were low. Cash flow was easy to manage since we could demand part payments in advance and full payments prior to delivery for most customers. So I didn't have to invest a lot of money in my new business. Navitas, this is how I did my SWOT analysis at the time of starting my new business, my second business. Opportunity, there were hundreds of tool makers in South China, mostly unorganized. Only the larger companies would hire professionals, English-speaking personnel that can work with overseas customers. I saw an opportunity to equip some of the smaller factories with the necessary systems and take them to world market. Strengths, my personal strengths, I had the industry experience, mainly automotive industry, from my previous company, Stacy. I believe I was capable of identifying talented people and make them work together as a team. I was able to put together systems, checks, and balances in place. And a good business is all about putting the right systems, checks, balances in place, and a good team. I had an industry network, from my so I was familiar with the markets of US, Europe, Indian markets, and the supply side in China. My weakness, I couldn't speak the language. I couldn't speak Chinese. Another thing which I could call my weakness is I'm risk averse. I don't borrow money. Throughout my entire career, I've never borrowed money. So it has always been zero debt. And I will not offer credit terms to customers. So the customers who do business with my company, I ask them to pay in advance. So there are no credit terms. And this, this is the reason I haven't been able to grow my business to a higher level. Threats. The factories I work with eventually may learn to work without me. That was a threat, and I realized this. The target segment I identified for my new business was the high-end tier 1 automotive customers who were the suppliers to companies like Tesla, BMW, Toyota, Volkswagen, Ford, GM, Chrysler. Reasons I picked up them as a target market. They demand higher standards. They are tough to work with. They are stable. They pay well. They are mid-sized in terms of annual mold purchases. Competition, I face competition with the larger companies with higher manufacturing capacities. The mistakes I made while starting my second business. When I started my first business, it was a humble beginning. There was no money. So we started without money with dining table as the office. But for my second business, there was money because I sold my business. So there was enough cash in the bank. So I started my new business with much fanfare, with much cash in the bank, and an IMT Kellogg School degree. Excuse me, that gave me a lot of confidence. I used to call it a vision at that time. I hired expensive, high-salaried personnel in Germany, France, and the US. I took an expensive office space in Hong Kong and built a large office in mainland China. I wanted to enjoy the money I made from the sale of my business. I got myself fancy cars, a sports car. I started flying first class. I started staying at expensive hotels and started dining at fancy restaurants, serving fine wine. Results, in a few years, I realized my company was making losses. I had negative cash flow. Recession came in the year 2008. I had almost no business. Stock market crashed. All my investments went down. I lost much of my net worth. Lessons learned. 2009, 2010, I went back to the drawing board. I wrote a business plan. I got rid of extra manpower. I changed compensation structure of all the sales employees, low base and high commissions. I lost a few people in the process. I moved to a smaller office and a smaller apartment. I sold the cars I had. I started cutting down my costs where I could. I worked hard to make the cash flow positive. By the year 2011, my cash flow became positive. The business started growing year to year, and we were on our way to make it a success once again. Until 2019, we were doing well. Then came the pandemic. 2021, my business is quite affected by the pandemic with the travel restrictions in place and significant anti-China sentiment. Even from being in India, there's a huge anti-China sentiment. Many companies, they won't just buy from us, because they're anti-China. I'm waiting to ride the storm and still keeping the business above the break-even point. I didn't have to let go of many of my employees. I've been able to retain my key employees and waiting to ride the storm. Next year, I expect to get the business back to 2019 levels and take it from there. My business model, we are a team of engineers to manage the functions that have direct interaction with customers. We are good at project management, design, development, and quality assurance. Our back office does the accounting, costing, customer service, logistics. We have resident engineers located close to the customers in US, Europe, and India for sales and after sales. We have invested in factories, excuse me, in their capital equipment when necessary. Factories where we invest, they give us exclusive rights for any business conducted outside of China. 2019, we made around 300 molds and we are about $10 million in sales. This year, we are down to less than half. We only will be making around 125 molds and about $4 million in turnover. That's the bad news. The good news is we are still profitable. We are above the break-even point. One moment. Okay, lessons learned by me over the years while running the business for over 20 years, and I'd like to share it with you. First, the customer is not always right. We say the customers are always right. My experience is the customers are not always right. You listen to your customers, you value their feedback inputs, but remember, you need to be better than them. If you're not better than your customers, then they don't need you. So you always need to be smarter. You always need to know your product, your business better than your customers do. Time is money. We need to focus on higher level revenue generating tasks. As a business owner, we should only do the tasks that only we can do. So I need to spend my time wisely. Focus on productivity. Time is the most important thing you have. Not all money is good money. There are always lots of good opportunities, or I would not say lots of good opportunities, but lots of opportunities. We need to be selective. We need to do what we are good at. There are no cheap shortcuts. You cannot become rich overnight. Progress isn't about a quantum leap. It's a series of small incremental gains. Learning is a continuous process. You need to invest in yourself, keep learning. Learning is a lifelong process. Outsource when it makes sense. You cannot be good at everything. There are some things that you're good at and other people can be good at other things. So outsource when it's necessary. Like for example, other factories, other suppliers, they may have economies of scale. They may be good at, they may be better at doing something than us. So we would outsource. Build your personal credibility as well as your company is very important. Always keep high ethical and professional standards. If things are not going well, question your abilities first before you question others. Work is life, enjoy it with a passion. Very important. Whatever you do, you need to enjoy it. If you don't enjoy it, you will not do well. It's not easy to find a balance between work and personal life. Hire people smarter than you. You can't be good at everything, so you need to hire people who can do the jobs that you can't do well. For example, I'm not good in accounting, so I would hire a good accountant. I'm not good in technical stuff, manufacturing stuff, so I'll hire people who know it better than I do. It's not just about core competency. During my, when I used to look for a job, this was a common question that I was asked. People would ask me during an interview, what's your core competency? And I used to tell them, I said, I don't have a single core competency. I'm average at a lot of things, and perhaps it's the sum total of averages, which is my core competency. So I'm a person who's an average at a lot of things. Just do it. Execution is the key. Like, you can always have good ideas, but good ideas are not worth a penny until you can execute them. I would imagine many of you would be entrepreneurs, so a few tips for you. And I'm sure you're getting a lot of tips from WhatsApp group chats and a few tips from my side as well. Desire. You need to have a strong determination to start your own business. Remember, 80% of new businesses don't last for more than 1 year, and 95% don't make it beyond 5 years. You need to be in the top 5% to make it a success, and that's not easy. So you need to have a very strong determination. You need to have enough money to ride through the gestation period. There will be a gestation period. You will not make money when you start a business from day one. You always need to have cash to ride through the gestation period. A known market. You should do what you know the best. The required personality traits. You need to be patient. You need to be able to deal with success and failures. You need to embrace uncertainty, seize opportunities, look for opportunities and don't miss them. A contagious belief in your business. Why do you think the product, service, or plan will be successful? Once you can identify your true motivation, you can inspire those around you. You need to have a strong belief in your business. Only then you can be successful. Stay focused. Don't give in to distraction. There will be many opportunities, but you need to stay focused. Just stay focused on what you're good at. Learn to invest. Now, this is something that you may not learn in business schools. I also didn't learn this in IMT or my Kellogg school days, how to invest your money. Any surplus capital, you need to make it work. So learn to invest. Don't rely on others. Nobody will make money for you. You need to make it yourself. And important, stay in good health. Be a sport. It's necessary. If you're not healthy, you will not be successful. Once you're ready for your startup, and I hope many of you will start your own business sooner or later, first, write a precise business plan. Test your ideas before investing lots of time and money. Define your vision, your mission, your objectives, your basic strategies with a simple workable action plan. Decide on a budget. You should set up your business with profitability in mind within a certain time period. Whenever you start your business, set a target for yourself that I'm going to make it profitable in a period of 6 months or 1 year or whatever time you set for yourself. Take care of the money, learn to invest at the right places. Don't waste your money. Validate your idea. Make sure there's a market. Make sure this is what the customer wants on an ongoing basis. The business has to sustain. Respond to feedback and refine your model. Once you start your business, you find something is not right, refine it. Keep improving your business plan. And important, build the right team. Key to success is the right team working well together. A few favorite quotes I'd like to share with you. First is from Bill Gates. He says, if you were born poor, it's not your fault. If you die poor, it's your fault. And I believe in this. We all have the ability to be rich. Okay, you must be the change you wish to see in the world. Steve Jobs, be a yardstick of quality. It's better to lose like a winner than to win like a loser. If everything seems to be under control, you're not going fast enough. Okay, this one is good. Good business leaders create a vision, articulate the vision, passionately own the vision, and relentlessly drive it to completion. Some of my favorite books, I'm sure you all have your favorite books. These are mine. My favorite book for investing is called The Intelligent Investor, Benjamin Graham. I would recommend all of you to read it. This book was written in the 40s. So since 40s until now, the basic principles of investing hasn't changed. Read this book and follow the tips, learn how to invest. Another book, which I guess most of you would have already read, it's called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Then there's a book called The Goal, The Tipping Point, 7 Habits. 7 Habits is a very common book. I'm sure you would have read it. Alchemist, Good to Great, Built to Last, on becoming a leader. Then there's a book on venture management by Cliff Connaughton. It's one of the good books on starting a new business. Okay, so my last slide is about corporate governance. And I talk about corporate governance to everybody who wants to start their own business. Corporate governance refers to the systems of rules, practices, and processes by which businesses are governed. We expect all entrepreneurs to abide by the 7 pillars of corporate governance. First, the rules of law. Follow the law of the land. Never evade taxes. Never break any law. Moral integrity. There will be many shortcuts. You will, come across, incidents where being corrupt will make things easier. But stay away from any forms of corruption, even if it means losing at times. While running my own business, like I have stayed away from corruption. Maybe I can, make my business grow. I can do better by doing things which are not right, but I have stayed away from it at all times. Professionalism and transparency, stay above board at all times. Participation, great things in businesses are never done by one person. They're always done by a team of people working well together. We need to remember this. Responsibility and accountability, that's the mark of a good leader. Effectiveness and efficiency, you need to build systems and processes that are effective and efficient, cut out unproductivity. Social responsibility, businesses that incorporate environmental, social, and corporate governance, we call it ESG criteria, tend to be more successful. We need to be responsible for the environment that we work in. I think that's my presentation. All right, thank you for listening patiently. I welcome any questions. You can ask me now in the chat group, or you can email me, or you can also find me on LinkedIn, whatever is convenient for you. And Abhinav told me I have 45 minutes. I have taken only 33 minutes, so we have some more time.
Those who are present in this session, I must inform you and probably may forewarn you also that what lot of things you will read into your entrepreneurship workshop in months to come. Probably it was a very encapsulated journey through a very long experiential account of him. To me, I say we cover it in 30 hours of workshop session. It was almost condensed into 33 minutes. Thank you, sir, for making this such a condensed and a powerful narrative of your journey.
Yeah, thank you.
From a small town, if I may use the word small town for a place like Meerut and Saharanpur.
Yeah.
And making it where you are. While there are many questions, and I, in very in advance, sir, I would extend my request to come whenever we are running this entrepreneurship workshop. There were so many questions when you were discussing these things, particularly beginning with what is the ownership concerns when you do business in China, particularly being an Indian and having an ownership structure which was very unique at that point in time. So if you can reflect a bit on that, and that will be little more reflective for the others as well.
Sure. So thank you, Mr. Tripathi. Here, so many people ask me, they say, you're a foreigner in China, you don't speak the language, how could you be successful in China? So it's about building credibility, like for example, if the Chinese person in India, we won't trust him easily. Likewise, I have been an Indian person in China. So it was not easy to, build trust. But over the years, when you stick to your word, then they see that you're a professional person. Whatever you say, you deliver, and then you start building credibility. Like my team, I employ, say, around, in the past I used to employ, say, around 70, 80 Chinese people, and they used to look up to me. They say, this is a person, who delivers what he says. And as a result, they stay with me. My employees, they have stayed with me over many years. They don't leave because they trust me. Likewise, my suppliers and my subcontractors, people I work with. So I won their trust. So it's about building credibility. Yeah. So being an Indian is not a disadvantage anymore.
And sir, specific things about when you were starting off and from just one employee to reaching to 100 employees in a decade's time. Do you now consider it as slow, or you consider it was the speed that was built very rightly for that point in time?
Yeah, when I started my first business in 1997, at that time there were lots of opportunities. There was a huge cost differential. People were looking at China, so we were able to grow fast. And when you start from zero, then you grow fast. So the second time when I started my second business, everybody was already into China, so it was not easy. We faced more competition. This is the second time. Yeah, the first time it was fast growth. Second time it's slow growth, but it's solid because now there's more experience with us.
So the students, those are future managers, those who are present in this session, you will understand the significance of this question in the sense that China pre 2005 and China after 2005, and doing business in China before 2005 and after 2005, particularly I'm saying when a lot of globalization related concerns started coming up. So in that sense, you will probably have the first mover advantage. Was really that an advantage to you, or after globalization, some of it actually became a problematic things for you as well?
Yeah, that is right. For the first business that I started, Stacy, we had the first mover advantage. We were early on. China was just started changing and started growing, so we were there early on. Yeah. For the second time, we didn't have the first mover advantage, but yeah, the advantage was experience and the know-how we had in place.
One thing just to begin it here, when we are talking in terms, I listen, a lot of people call themselves serial entrepreneurs. I mean, in a very quick span of time, in 7, 8 years time, something found up in college and then they move out of the college and then they get fascinated, work somewhere. Again, in 2 years time, they start up. I know a couple of people in last 6, 7 years, they say they have founded 4 organizations or 4 startups. How do you see this trend into the Indian context where a lot of youngsters are getting into the businesses quite early, exiting early, and probably what you said is staying on into the business and having belief into your business. What do you advise to this future managers that when you start a business, how long you need to give time to it? Sometimes I find serial entrepreneurship, while it looks good, but does it have any weak linkages, or does it have any weaknesses in the planning per se?
I would say it depends on the business. Like, for example, taking my example, I would run a business as long as I enjoy it. Like my current business, I'm enjoying it. Like many people, they ask me, they say, why don't you sell it? You could retire, enjoy the money you have. But I'm enjoying it. I mean, so as long as I enjoy it, I would keep running it. Yeah, but for other people, entrepreneurs, they may look at it differently. They may, say they don't enjoy it, or they want to, there's an opportunity to sell, to exit. So I would say it would vary on a case-to-case basis. But I would say if you're enjoying it, keep running it. If you stop enjoying it or you don't see a growth anymore, then you could exit and start something else.
So does that thought comes into the times of pandemic also, when you're thinking that things are, because what I like most when you said you have a vision that business will get back to pre-2019 level, and that's a very optimistic belief into the business. And I think in the toughest of the time, when you have that belief, how exactly you are, having that belief into your business that something pre-2019 will return back. What are the reasons?
Yeah. So, I thought the strengths of my business, that hasn't changed. The strengths of the business are we are able to make good quality molds in a short time, and that hasn't changed. So now the customers, because they are not able to travel to China, they make molds locally, like they make it in Europe, they make it in the US. And when I talk to them, they say it takes longer and it costs much more. Like when you make the mold in Germany, it will cost twice as much, and it will take twice as much time. So the mold that we make in 2 months, they make it in 4 months. The mold that we make for $100,000, they make it for $200,000. That means that hasn't changed. So once pandemic subsides and travel starts again, we are still strong. So that hasn't changed. So that's the reason I still have belief in my business.
And sir, coming back to this, when we look at it, and since you have been a very avid reader of multiple things, I would make all of you to think in those dimensions. That while pandemic has disturbed, our pandemic has literally changed so much around us, will the new basics of business will emerge. Our basic business will get back to its old basics, the cost advantages. Or after globalization, now there is a lot of focus on nationalism, as you say, anti-China sentiment into multiple parts of the world.
Right, yeah.
So do you think that the businesses will emerge with new set of basics
more focused on to regional and nationalistic sentiments rather than more global and caste-based sentiments? Because a lot of future managers will look up to working into the globalized markets. And what if they face resistance on nationalistic sentiments into different ways?
Yeah, that's right. So we are facing this. For example, I can give you an example of one of our customers in India, Hero Motorcycles. So Hero Motorcycles used to be our big customers. Now, since the pandemic, and they say in our company, they have been asked not to buy anything from China until it's absolutely necessary. So the owners of the company, Hero Motorcycles, Mr. Munjal, he says, they will not buy from China until it's very necessary because they want to, make it a point to the government. And I respect their opinion. I said, that's fine, do what is right for the company. But now things are changing. They didn't buy from us for the last 1.5 years. And I was talking to some of the managers yesterday. They say things are changing. They try to do things in India, but it's not going too well. They say they have to go back to China because the kind of efficiencies they see in China, the short lead times, the quality, they say it's much better in China. So the business is coming back. Yeah, we did get affected temporarily. It's coming back. Likewise, from other customers in Germany and US, there was a bit of anti-China sentiment. In the US, they started imposing tariffs, which affected our business. But again, now they don't care about the tariffs, so it's coming back.
So, sir, there is a young scholar, a student asking a very interesting question. Sir, do you think if you're losing business due to anti-China sentiment, are you not thinking about shifting to India?
I did come across this thought many times. Why don't I set up a base in India? The reason is, when I was younger, I had a lot of energy, the drive, the enthusiasm. I don't have it right now. Moving from China to India will need a lot of hard work, a lot of enthusiasm. Maybe like IMT, and some of them can do it because they have the energy. They are younger. For me, I am 56 years old now, so I don't have that drive, the energy. That is the only reason for not moving to India right now. Otherwise, I would. If I can find a good team in India from the people I'm interacting with today, maybe I would.
I think one student, Vikrant, have raised hand. If you have the question, you can write in chat box, or else you can go. And one student asked very curiously, ever got offers to, sir, buy out this business in which you are in right now?
Like to sell this business, the business I'm running? Yeah, I did get some offers to buy my current business, but I'm enjoying it. So right now I'm not selling the business, and if I sell the business now, I won't get good value because my business has has gone down and during this pandemic time. So if I have to sell, I have to grow it to a certain level, increase the value of my business, and then sell it, and it will take a few years of work.
So it's a bummer about the time also, that the time in which you are in.
Yeah.
Probably the valuation plays a lot of role.
Yeah, that's right. I need to increase the valuation first. And I don't have a succession plan as yet. My son, he's not interested in my business. He's in New York. He wants to be a banker, so doesn't want to work with me. So, but I have a young team of managers, so they're enthusiastic. So one option is to make managers the owners and let them run the business. Yeah, and the second option is to sell it and exit, or to get a partner. Sell it partly. So have a business partner.
And sir, one student reflectively is thinking, and a lot of us may be having that question, what will be the role of Navitas in EV markets? And how do you foresee that this market growing up and you repositioning your business, particularly looking at the future perspective and how you will recraft your strategy looking at that?
Sure. So, right now, our biggest customer right now is Tesla. So we do have, significant experience in the EV market. And also the future of automobile industry, as we see it will change to either electric or to autonomous cars. Now, autonomous cars are good and bad. Autonomous cars will have, lesser lighting, lesser plastic parts, then lesser molds. But then that's okay. I mean, they will still have plastic parts in autonomous cars or electric vehicles. So we will have an opportunity. So business will not get affected by this change, but it will move to the better.
So, sir, very recently we saw that pattern of integration is changing. I mean, the way business schools teach about vertical and horizontal integration, and you yourself moved from being integrating it very differently to different parts in time. how do you see that the move of many app-based or platform-based business owners and shifting back to, nuts and bolts kind of business where they are going and vertically integrating or starting up something new altogether? So do you think that because of this emergence of more platform-based opportunities that are emerging up, how they will look at the businesses, which are, again, I would say, brick and mortar model of businesses, and particularly the kind of time that we are getting into?
So, like we don't see technology making a huge change in our business. Like during pandemic times, the only thing that has changed is now people are not able to travel. In the past, our customers, they would travel to China and, work with us on making the mold, making it complete for production. So the way we work is, we make a mold. For example, we make a mold for a handle use in a car. So we will make the mold and we'll run the mold for a few thousand pieces. The customers will come to China, validate the mold, and then they will take it back with them, for Tesla or BMW or whatever car it is. Now they are not able to travel, so we do it remotely. Like we will, do a video call, or we will let them see we'll run the mold using a video so they can see it's running well. We'll send them samples, measurement reports, so they're able to approve the mold. So that is the only change we are seeing during this time of pandemic. In terms of technology, not really. I think, to make a mold, we still need, the same process, the same machines. So that doesn't seem to be changing in the near future. About vertical and horizontal integration. So the choice is, we make the molds. We don't make the parts. So there's often, a temptation to start making the parts. So, many of our customers say, why don't you start making the parts? We say we don't make the parts because, that's our customer's expertise. If we start making parts, then we'll be competing with our customers, and we don't want to do that. So we stay with the business model we have in place, and we keep getting better at it. We keep, getting more experience. We keep getting better capital equipment to make better molds. So that's how we will expand. Like the recent investment we have made is in, buying capital equipment to make better molds, make them more precise.
Okay, that would have been probably the next question that I was asking, that what businesses in future you are looking up to, that how they will evolve and where you will get into, or you will like to consolidate on where you are?
That's right. So the same business. Okay, another example is, 3D printing. Like in the past, we used to make prototype molds. And now after 3D printing started, people didn't need prototype molds because they could use a 3D printer to make samples. But that was only a small part of our business. So first we thought we could invest in a 3D printer and start using it to make samples. But then we thought customers can do it better. I mean, China doesn't bring any advantage by doing 3D printing over here in China. So yeah, so we lost business to 3D printing, and that's okay. That wasn't a significant part of the business.
Mm-hmm. And I said this question might seem little, maybe a more an intergenerational concern. When you started off, probably many things that we see around us now, they were not even the elicitors of starting new business. Someone is very curiously asking, what was the curiosity at your point in time that attracted you to start your own venture? And I will add, would it be any way different if you are starting up as a fresh youngster and graduate out of the college today?
Okay, good question. Okay, it may not sound very nice, but when I was working, when I used to be an employee, I didn't like to take directions from my superiors. And there was always a conflict. Okay, I had a very good boss in Jumbo Electronics and a very nice person from IIM Ahmedabad. But I didn't like to take instructions. I said, I can do better than him. Why is he telling me what to do? So I thought the only way to change this is to be on the other side. When I'm on my own, I don't take instructions from anyone. I make mistakes, and I suffer for those mistakes. So not a very good reason to start my own business, but that was my reason. I didn't want to take instructions from anyone.
So those who are listening actually this session, you are actually more wiser by the experience which is saying the reasons to start businesses may also be as autonomic like this one. While obviously you have a business plan, you have a model, you have a team, you have other abilities, but becoming your own boss. And research has proven that among many other traits that youngsters would like to become entrepreneurs is that not taking orders. And when we say orders, it's not only in a negative sense of orders, but in a sense of creating and owning something new, which you can say it is yours.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, so I encourage a lot of people I meet. I said, once in your lifetime, you have to start being on your own. When you are a regular salaried employee, you get a salary check at the end of your month, and that's your comfort zone. So once in your lifetime, you need to step out of this comfort zone, and when there's no salary at the end of your month, you need to, do it, you're on your own. So you need to have that experience. Start something on your own and see if it works. If it works, great. If it doesn't work, you can always find a job.
So just moderating a question which just falls on the similar line. When you started recruiting people, what exactly you were looking into those people? I mean, what qualities you were looking for in the people with whom you started are your first employees? Or if you are recruiting now, what qualities or traits you look into a person?
All right. So here's a funny story, about my first employee. So when I started my first business in 1997, so first 6 months I was working from my dining table, my home office. Then I was able to afford a small office. So I moved out of my home and I set up my own office. And then I was looking around for employees and nobody would come because there's just one Indian guy working in a small office. So, so there was a woman who came to my office making a sales call. She was working for a transformers company, came to my office, made her presentation, a sales pitch, and then stayed back. She said, "It's very hot outside. Can I just stay in your office for some more time?" I said, "Yeah, of course. Make yourself comfortable, have some water." And then she started talking. She says, "I don't like my company. I don't like my boss. It's so hot. And he wants me to make sales calls at this time." I said, "Okay, I'm not a big company. I've just started. Would you like to work for me?" She said, "Oh, I never thought about this." She says, "Okay, I'll have to ask my parents." I said, "Yeah, sure." So she went back to her family and said, "There's an Indian guy who's offering me a job." And then she came back to me. She says, "I'm okay working with you, but my family is not comfortable. They'd like to meet you." I said, "Okay." So I met her family, they invited me for lunch and they interviewed me. They asked me, "What do you have in mind?" And, so after having lunch with me, they were comfortable. They say, "Okay, we'll let our daughter work with you." So that's how I got my first employee. My second employee was, okay, the first employee was for, for logistics, for helping me with shipments. My second employee was for accounting. So this lady came for an interview, and during the interview, she broke down. She says, "I just graduated from the Chinese University of Hong Kong and, got my first job in a big CPA firm at Deloitte and Touche, and I've been with them for 6 months, and after 6 months, they fired me. They say, they're downsizing and they don't need me." So she says, "I'll join you if you promise me not to fire me." I said, "I won't fire you unless the business goes down." She says, "Okay." So she joined my company 23 years ago, and she's still with me, after 23 years, and one of my key employees. And now she's a part owner of my company, Navitas. But I still remember that story when she came to my office and broke down during the interview. So during the initial days, it was not easy to find good people, but when business was successful, I could find good people and retain them. I got some interns from IMT a few years ago, and they were very good. I got 4 interns to do a market research in India. I was making an entry in the Indian market. I asked them to do a market research for me for the business that I do, and they did it very, very well. So I owe them this. The reason for my success in India is because of the interns, the help they gave me in the beginning.
So very, very discursive stories about that. What qualities? It also depends on the context in which you are in. Probably you yourself will get interviewed for your first employee by the family of the employee.
Yes.
That's something which happens, and that can happen. So now reflecting back on this very interesting journey that you have made. And when you said you're entering into India and as an old institution of yours, IMT did it well, how do you foresee that a student should look up to getting those opportunities of real life opportunities to work for organizations, and how they should blend it into their learning? I mean, so the way world is changing, where more practical exposure and experience is required apart from what they would be learning in the class. So how do you think that such a balance can be imagined by the students in their practice, and what that should look up to, particularly from your startup aspirational training part?
Okay, in my opinion, I think, okay, first option number 1, I think some of the students in IMT, you all are here, you all will be here for about 2 years. Some of you can get together, put together a business plan and try it out, no harm. Like whatever you learn in your classroom, make use of that knowledge and to put together a business plan and see if you have the confidence to start something on your own once you graduate. That's option number one. Option number two, go and look for a job, gain some experience, and once you feel the confidence of being on your own, then you can start. But keep thinking, your vision should be, okay, after graduating from IMT, I'm going to work for the next 5 years, and after 5 years I should be able to start something on my own. And keep thinking on those lines. So eventually you can be your own boss. So whether you do it now or later depends on when you have the confidence. Once you have the confidence and you have a business plan that you believe in, I think you could start something on your own.